My brother demanded I hand over half of my inheritance since families should share everything. When I refused, he gathered relatives and declared, "She's hoarding wealth while we struggle." But the day he showed up at the lawyer's office to contest the will, a hidden clause was revealed, and as his smug face turned pale, I leaned in and whispered, "Guess who's actually getting cut off?" This happened over the last year. It's been heavy, painful, and honestly, so surreal that I'm still trying to process it. But now that things are starting to fall into place, I wanted to share it here because I know some of you will understand. I'm 38. I live alone in a quiet suburb just outside of Pittsburgh. I don't have a partner or kids. I'm a dental hygienist. I've always been the one who follows the rules, keeps my head down, and avoids family drama when possible. But last year, my dad passed away. And since then, everything exploded. My brother Bradley, 41, has always been one of those people who somehow thinks the world owes him something. He was the golden boy growing up, star of his high school football team, loud, confident, popular. But once he graduated, things went downhill fast. He never really held a stable job. He bounced from landscaping to car sales to some MLM health product thing. He and his wife have 3 kids. I've never said this out loud, but they've always seemed one emergency away from total collapse. And honestly, I tried to help, at least in the beginning. My dad, Hank, was a Vietnam vet who worked at a garage his whole life. The man was tough as nails but had a heart under all that grit. Mom died when I was 15, so it was just us and Dad. He never remarried. He didn't talk about emotions much, but you could feel how deeply he cared. About 2 years ago, Dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And it was aggressive. When he told us, I dropped everything. I quit my job temporarily and moved into his place to take care of him. I took him to appointments, cooked for him, helped him to the bathroom, cleaned him up when he had accidents, managed his meds. Everything. Bradley came by a few times at first. He brought fast food and sat on his phone. Said he couldn't really handle this stuff emotionally. After that, it was mostly just texts like, "How's he doing?" or, "Let me know if anything changes." He never offered to help with the house, the bills, or even to give me a break. It was just me and Dad, day in and day out. Watching someone you love slowly die is hell. And I did it because he deserved better than to go through that alone. Dad passed away in his sleep on a Thursday morning. Peacefully at home. I sat there with him for 2 hours before calling anyone. I just needed to be in the silence. The house felt hollow without his presence. We had a small service. Bradley showed up late with his kids and stayed for 20 minutes. Then he left. No real goodbye, no real grief. I remember thinking, I guess this is who he is now. About a week later, I met with Dad's lawyer, Mr. D'Angelo. He's been in the family forever. He was calm, kind, and said, "Your father was very specific with his wishes." That's when I learned what the will said. He left me the house. Fully paid off. He left me his old Dodge Challenger, the car he rebuilt from scratch after retiring. He left me his savings account. Around $170,000. Bradley got $20,000. And Dad's fishing boat, which he never used. It was clear as day. No confusion. No vague wording. Everything was spelled out. And honestly, I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. I didn't expect that much. But I knew why he did it. I took care of him. I was there. I gave up everything for him. Bradley didn't. I didn't call Bradley after the meeting. I figured Mr. D'Angelo would handle it. But 2 days later, I got a text from him. "WTF is this? You're getting almost $200K in the house? I get $20K? Are you serious?" I just replied, "That's what Dad wanted. It's in the will." He wrote back instantly, "You're seriously not gonna split it? Family shares everything." I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. What do you say to someone who wasn't there, now suddenly demanding half? An hour later, another text. "We're drowning over here and you're sitting on a pile of money. You think that's fair? Seriously?" And then came the guilt trip. The kids need braces. Our roof's leaking. I might lose my job. But you get to sit in a house you didn't even pay for? Again, no response from me. That weekend, I got added to a massive group chat with a bunch of extended family. I hadn't spoken to half these people in years. Bradley started it. His opening message was, "Hey fam. Just found out my sister kept all of Dad's estate even though she already has a job and no kids. Meanwhile, I'm struggling to keep the lights on. I guess some people think money matters more than family." That was the beginning of the war. Aunt Sharon chimed in with, "Wow, I didn't know that. I thought your dad was fairer than that." Uncle Steve. That doesn't sound like Hank at all. Cousin Rachel. Honestly, I'm shocked. That house should have gone to both of you. It didn't matter that I was the one who cared for him. That I lost months of income. That I gave up my life to make sure Dad died with dignity. No one cared about the facts. They just ran with Bradley's version of the story. I stayed silent for a bit. But then I messaged. Dad made his decision. I didn't write the will. I followed his wishes. If anyone has questions, talk to his lawyer. Aunt Sharon replied, You always were good at playing the victim. I muted the chat after that. Bradley didn't stop there. He started calling people one-on-one. He told them I manipulated Dad, that I got in his head when he was sick, that I tricked him into giving me everything, that he wasn't in his right mind, that I'd taken advantage of a dying man. I got phone calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in a decade. Some were furious. Others were just nosy. One even asked if I'd be willing to share some of the inheritance for the sake of family peace. No, I would not. About 2 weeks after the group chat mess, I got another call from Mr. D'Angelo. He said, Bradley has formally requested to contest the will. He's filed for a hearing, claiming undue influence and mental incompetence. I wasn't surprised. I asked him what would happen. He told me it might go to court, but that my dad had anticipated this. He asked me if I remembered anything about a clause. I paused. Then it hit me. Dad once said, months before he died, if Bradley pulls any of his usual crap, just tell D'Angelo to check the Daisies clause. That'll take care of it. At the time, I thought it was a joke. I laughed. He didn't. When I told D'Angelo, he got quiet. Then he said, let me look into that. A few days later, he called me back and said, there's a sealed annex to the will. It's only to be opened if someone contests the inheritance. Your father was very specific. He sounded almost amused. We didn't tell Bradley about the clause. We let him show up to the courthouse with his cheap lawyer, full of confidence. He wore a suit I hadn't seen since our cousin's wedding, still had the tags on it. His wife came with him, looking smug, arms crossed like she was waiting for a payout. I sat on the other side of the courtroom. Calm. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I trusted my dad. D'Angelo stood up when it was his turn and said, Your Honor, we have a sealed clause in the will, to be opened only if a contest is filed. I believe this situation qualifies. The judge allowed it. D'Angelo opened the envelope, adjusted his glasses, and started reading. What came next made the entire room dead silent. D'Angelo's voice didn't shake. Not even a little. He read the clause like he'd been waiting for this moment. Clause 14b. If any beneficiary named in this will attempts to challenge, contest, or legally dispute any part of this document, their entire share shall be immediately revoked and reallocated at the full discretion of the executor. Silence. You could hear the scratch of someone adjusting their chair. A pen dropped. Even the judge paused before speaking. Bradley sat frozen. His smug look drained slowly, like color fading from a photograph. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. His lawyer leaned in, whispering fast. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the panic. The judge looked at D'Angelo. Is that clause enforceable? D'Angelo nodded. Absolutely. It was reviewed, notarized, and filed. All legally binding. The judge turned to Bradley's lawyer. Any objection? The guy stuttered. We need time to, Your Honor, I wasn't made aware, no one was. D'Angelo interrupted. Per Mr. Harper's instructions, the clause was only to be unsealed under these exact circumstances. The judge looked at Bradley. You still want to proceed? That moment dragged. The room felt too bright, too quiet. And then Bradley, with his jaw tight and face pale, muttered, No. I withdraw the petition. But the judge shook his head. Too late. The clause is triggered by the filing, not the outcome. You've already contested the will. Bradley looked at me. He didn't say anything. Just stared like he was trying to burn a hole through me with his eyes. The judge confirmed that, under the clause, Bradley's entire share was void. The $20,000? Gone. The boat? Gone. All of it now under my control, as the executor. I didn't say a word. Just nodded. As we left the courtroom, Bradley's wife started shouting at him in the hallway. Loud. People turned their heads. She was red in the face, saying things like, I told you not to push it. We needed that money, Brad. You always screw everything up. I walked right past them. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. The next day, I woke up to 30 new texts and 6 missed calls. Cousin Rachel. Please tell me what happened in court. I heard something about a clause. And Sharon. Call me ASAP. I feel like I've been misled. Even Uncle Steve, who hadn't texted me since 2012, wrote, Hey kiddo, just checking in. You alright? I ignored them all. Then Bradley called me. First time in months he actually called instead of texting. I let it ring out. He called again. And again. Finally, I picked up on the fourth try. No hello. Just said, What do you want? He sounded tired. Not angry. Just worn. You didn't have to do that. I paused. Do what? Let them take everything. You could have stopped it. I almost laughed. Brad, you filed the challenge. You triggered the clause. Dad warned us this could happen. Yeah, but $20,000. That's not worth cutting me off for life. Maybe it is, I said quietly. Especially when you tried to turn the whole family against me. There was a long silence. Then he said something that stuck with me. You don't understand what it's like to be drowning all the time. I said, No. But I know what it's like to give everything to someone who wouldn't lift a finger when it mattered. Then I hung up. I thought it would end there. But it didn't. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. It was from my cousin Leo, one of the quieter ones. He was always in the background during family events, the type who kept to himself. His letter said, I'm writing because I think you should know what Brad's been doing. After the court hearing, he's been going around telling people you blackmailed Dad before he died. He said you threatened to cut him out of your life if he didn't rewrite the will. He's showing people fake texts. I saw one. It was badly edited. But some of the family believes it. Just thought you should know. I stared at the letter for a long time. Bradley wasn't done. Not even after everything. Not even after losing every dollar. He couldn't just take the hit and move on. He had to try to drag me down with him. That same day, I got a voicemail from Aunt Sharon, yelling about how disappointed she was, saying things like, I didn't raise my kids to be manipulators, and I thought your father raised you better too. I had no idea what lie Bradley told her. I didn't respond. But I did call Mr. D'Angelo. He agreed to meet with me again. I told him everything. The fake texts. The new rumors. The voicemail. He leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers together, and said, Then maybe it's time we discuss the second clause. I blinked. What second clause? He smiled. Your dad had layers. There's more to this than you know. I sat in D'Angelo's office trying to figure out what he meant by the second clause. I thought I knew everything in that will. I'd read it 3 times, even had a folder at home with sticky notes on it. D'Angelo opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick, sealed, and had a handwritten label in my dad's sharp, blocky handwriting. Executor eyes only, open if Bradley continues. He placed it in front of me but didn't open it. Your dad was careful, he said. Too careful, if you asked me. But he knew his son. I didn't say anything. I just waited. D'Angelo broke the seal and started reading. Inside wasn't another clause, at least not in the legal sense. It was a letter. A long one. Written to me. It started. If you're reading this, it means your brother couldn't leave well enough alone. I'm sorry. I tried to make things simple for you. He went on to explain something I hadn't known, that 5 years earlier, Dad had actually drafted a different will. In that version, everything was split 50-50ths. House, money, car, all of it. But then something happened. Dad had caught Bradley stealing money from him. He didn't go into detail. Just said he found out Bradley had forged his signature to withdraw $3,000 from one of his accounts. Dad had quietly handled it by changing the password and moving his money to a different bank. He never confronted Bradley. He just watched. Waited. 3 months later, Dad caught wind of something worse. Apparently, Bradley had taken out a payday loan using Dad's name as a co-signer. That one didn't go through, probably because Dad's credit was frozen after the first incident. But that was the last straw. I realized then that I couldn't trust him. I didn't want to believe it. But if a man will steal from his father, he'll steal from anyone. I was frozen reading it. I had no idea. Not a clue. Then the letter shifted again. I know Bradley. I know how he thinks. He believes everything is owed to him. And when he doesn't get what he wants, he makes noise. He's loud. He lies. He drags people down with him. So, if he tries to ruin you after I'm gone, you have my permission to do the following. D'Angelo handed me another folder. Inside were bank records, security camera footage stills, even an affidavit from the bank manager confirming that Bradley had posed as Dad during the first withdrawal. Dated. Signed. All prepped and ready. It was a freaking bomb. And Dad had saved it. Just in case. I stared at the papers. Why didn't he press charges? D'Angelo shrugged. He didn't want to ruin his son's life while he was still alive. But he didn't want you to pay the price either. I asked. So what do I do with this? He slid the folder back toward me. That's your choice. I didn't do anything with it right away. I left his office and drove around for 2 hours, just thinking. The next week, things escalated. Bradley started posting on Facebook. He made a post with a screenshot of a fake text from Dad, saying I threatened to isolate him unless he gave me the house. It was clearly fake. The font was wrong, the timestamp made no sense, and Dad never texted like that. He used full sentences and hated abbreviations. But people bought it. A few mutual friends from high school even commented things like, "Wow, I always knew something was off about her." Others said, "Family over money. Always." I stayed quiet again. Maybe out of shock. Maybe just tired. But the line was crossed when my boss pulled me into his office. He'd gotten an anonymous email with a copy of the Facebook post and a message saying I was being investigated for inheritance fraud, and might be a legal risk to have on staff. I had to show him the will, the court record, and even a notarized letter from D'Angelo just to calm things down. Luckily, he believed me. But the fact that I even had to explain myself at work? That was it. I opened the folder again that night and scanned everything in. The next morning, I emailed one thing to Bradley. Just one file. It was a photo of him from the security camera at the bank. No subject. No message. Just the image. He didn't reply. But he deleted the Facebook post within the hour. Quietly. Without a word. I thought maybe that would finally shut it down. But 2 days later, Aunt Sharon showed up at my door. Physically. In person. I didn't let her in. She stood on my porch, arms crossed, coat still zipped up. "Your brother's going through a lot," she said. "He made some mistakes, but he's still family. This whole thing is getting out of hand." I asked her, "Did he tell you he stole from Dad?" She blinked. "He told me you'd say that." I laughed once, dry and bitter. "Of course he did." Then she said the one thing that made it all click. "He's scared people are going to find out what he did to your dad's accounts. That's why he's so defensive. Just, whatever you're planning, maybe don't." I didn't answer her. I closed the door. Now I knew she knew. They all knew. Or at least suspected. The twist? They weren't defending Bradley because they believed him. They were defending him because they were afraid of what I might reveal. And suddenly I realized. I held all the cards. I didn't plan to expose Bradley. Not at first. I thought maybe sending that bank photo would scare him enough to stop. Quietly back down. Let things die out. I didn't need revenge, I just wanted peace. But peace wasn't coming. A few days after Sharon showed up at my door, I got invited to a family brunch at our cousin Olivia's place. She lived about 45 minutes away in a bigger suburb and liked to host. I hadn't gone to one in over a year, but this time. I don't know. Something in me said go. Maybe I was tired of hiding. Maybe I was tired of people whispering while I stayed silent. I wore jeans and a simple sweater. No makeup. I didn't want to impress anyone. I wanted to be seen as I was, someone who had nothing left to prove. When I arrived, the house was already full. Smelled like bacon and cinnamon rolls. The usual small talk was buzzing in the kitchen. Kids were running around. It could have passed for any normal Sunday, except I could feel the tension before anyone said a word to me. People went quiet when I walked in. Then there were the fake smiles. The too bright. "Hey!" S. The hugs with one arm. Olivia offered me coffee. I said sure. Bradley was there. He was standing in the corner of the dining room, laughing too hard at a joke someone made. When he saw me, he froze for half a second, then went back to his performance. I sat down in the living room while people drifted in and out. Then Aunt Sharon walked in with a forced smile and said, "Glad you came." I gave her a look that said I wasn't here for pleasantries. Eventually, Olivia stood up and clinked her glass. "Let's all take a moment to remember Uncle Hank. It's been a few months. I know some stuff has been going on, but we're family. And we should try to stay connected." A few people nodded. Someone mumbled, "Hear, hear." Then Bradley stood up. He actually stood up. "Yeah. I just want to say something," he said, holding a coffee mug like it made him look humble. "I know there's been a lot of confusion lately. misunderstandings. And I probably didn't handle it the best way. But I loved my dad. And I just want people to know, I didn't try to hurt anyone. I was just trying to make things right. The audacity made me laugh. Out loud. Everyone turned toward me. I stood up. Really? I said, voice shaking, but loud enough. You want to talk about making things right? After you forged Dad's signature? After you tried to steal from him while he was dying? His face turned. Instantly. From fake sorrow to pure panic. What are you even talking about? He said, forcing a laugh. Now you're just making stuff up. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. The one D'Angelo gave me. I held it up. This is a signed affidavit from Dad's bank manager. These are the withdrawal slips with your handwriting. Security footage stills. You want me to show everyone? The room was dead quiet. Olivia whispered. Wait, what? Cousin Rachel leaned forward. What is she saying? Bradley's wife shot up, grabbing his arm. Brad, is this true? He yanked his arm back. She's lying. I flipped open the folder and pulled out the photo. The one with him at the bank counter, pretending to be Dad. I held it in the air like a card in a magic trick. Want to explain this? He looked around, eyes darting. You're faking this. You're photoshopping stuff. You're just mad Dad wanted us to split things. I said nothing. I just looked at Sharon. You knew, I said. She didn't answer. She didn't even blink. But her face fell, just a little. That told me everything. Bradley's wife stepped forward. You told me you earned that money. That your dad left you out on purpose to spite you. Bradley exploded. I did. I deserved more than 20 grand. She lived in his house for free. He never gave me a thing. I should have had half. But you stole, someone said quietly. It was Leo, the cousin who sent me the letter. You lied, he added louder. You lied to all of us. Bradley turned red. He looked at me like he wanted to scream. But then, something in him broke. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just slumped back into the chair like someone had pulled a cord out of him. He said softly, He never loved me like he loved you. Silence. It hit harder than any of the shouting. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Sharon got up and left the room. Just walked out. Bradley didn't cry. He just stared at the floor like the truth had finally caught up with him, and there was nowhere left to hide. People started murmuring. Olivia asked if everyone was okay. Someone went to get water. It was chaos, in the quietest way possible. I left the folder on the table. I walked out. I didn't say goodbye. The next day, Bradley texted me. You got what you wanted. I didn't respond. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Again. Inside was a check. $500. And a note that just said, I'm sorry. It's not enough. I know that. I didn't cash it. Sharon hasn't called. Olivia sent me a message that just said, That brunch, wow. Hope you're okay. I replied, I will be. Leo messaged me again. Said he was proud of me for standing up for myself. Said if I ever wanted to grab lunch, he was around. Funny how the quiet ones are the only ones who actually see. I still live in Dad's house. It doesn't feel heavy anymore. The Challenger is parked out back. I drive it once a week. Just to keep it alive. I think about Dad sometimes. What he saw. What he knew. How he tried to protect me even after he was gone. There's still a part of me that feels hollow. Like family broke and can't be glued back together. But there's also peace. Real peace. Because for once, I didn't let someone walk all over me. And that's enough. For now.